Welcome to Wild Talk, where conservation meets conversation. Today I'm joined by Kyle Stelter, but he's wearing a different hat this time. Today he's wearing one for the Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners, and he's here to unpack why this national coalition is needed and why it's urgently here to help us protect our wild spaces and our heritage. Then I sit down with George from Rozvelt, who's here to chat about their outdoor gear and what sets it apart in the field. Stick around. This is Wild Talk. I'm your host, Steve Hamilton, and you are watching Wild Talk. This episode of Wild Talk is brought to you by Hornady. Accurate, deadly, dependable. Bronc Beer. Great fucking beer. Umarex Air Guns. Hunt with air. Wild TV Plus, where the hunts never end. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Wild Talk. We're rolling through hunting season. We're trying to bring you the stories that you want to hear, you want to watch. So let's dig into the meat of what's really going on in the hunting world, the conservation world, sport shooting world, and kind of set the stage for what we're doing here. Well, welcoming back a good friend of mine to the show. He's no stranger, Kyle from, well, you're technically the Wild Sheep Society's CEO, but you're not wearing that hat for this. We're going to talk about a new mover and shaker in the conservation world, the Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners. So, Kyle, I'm going to welcome you with that hat on.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Steve. And I think for your listeners, the one thing I just want to acknowledge, first of all, is Wild TV looks after hunters. Wild Talk, the work that you do, and the broader Wild TV network. I see their leadership team in Ottawa. I see them stepping up, and they care. They care about hunters. They care about hunters' rights, and they're out there defending them. And I know we're going to talk about that today. And that's really the genesis of the Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners. I'm going to call it CWCP. Mm-hmm. I'll refer to it a lot because that's a mouthful. We were laughing before we got rolling here about that. And, but anyway, just, hats off to your platform and of course, Wild TV for that leadership in our space. And we see it, the work the CCFR is doing through Wild TV and the many other messages that get out there. Wild TV cares about hunters. And I love it.
Oh, absolutely. We do. You can just take a look at my background here. You can see that we actually hunt. We do care about what is going on the landscape. And occasionally you may have seen on my show that I tend to push a little bit of buttons of people and try and fire them up to actually give back, to care about the future of wildlife and habitat. So what was that spark that said, we need to create the Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners, the CWCP?
Steve, you and I have talked about this a lot, just personally, about the train wreck that hunters are in, our social license, our image. And we've worked on projects together over the years, One Campfire and others too. And it's a pervasive issue in our space. We see it on the gun lobby now. And, there's a bunch of gun lobby advocates out there doing great work, CCFR being one of them. And really, there's a bit of a sort of a vacancy in the hunting space. There are orgs out there doing it, but there's not a concerted effort really being done. And so, you and I know that's a problem. It's a problem in our space that we need to find a way to get together, get everyone on the same page, find a way to sort of look after the rights of hunters, and in this case, trappers. Trappers is under the CWCP umbrella, and I'll talk about that in a bit. As a representative of the Wild Sheep Society BC, I've been going out to the Conservative Hunting and Angling. It's their symposium that they have every year, and they have they didn't do it this year actually because it was an election year and it was a little bit wonky with the election cycle and a whole bunch of other things. Really, no reason other than that. They hold this symposium out in Ottawa, and I've attended the last 2 years, and some excellent dialogue. We talked about Moby out there, some wild sheep issues and issues across the landscape. But one thing that kept coming up is like, hey, where's the national lobby or the national voice for hunters? And, we don't really have one. There's fish and game organizations that are doing great work within their province and work in there. But really, where's the national voice for hunters? And, like I said, we've got them for the firearms lobby and everything like that. So this came up 3 years ago when we were in Ottawa, and then we were out there last year, and I could even see it was even worse. It was like we've seen what's going on in Manitoba now with the loss of access, and I think you've had that on your show,
I
that
have.
issue. Yeah. So there's lots of things that we're like, hey, what can we do? And I kept seeing people say, hey, we need to do more, and everyone was kind of looking around the room, going, well, who's going to do it?
Who's going to
And
take that lead?
I was like, yeah, we need to do something here. And so Blaine Culkins, he's the conservative
Yep.
MP out of Alberta. He's the chair
Mm-hmm.
of that symposium. And I talked to Blaine afterwards. I said, Blaine, you've referenced it. You've talked about this sort of national voice for hunters and trappers, but who's doing what? And Blaine's like, I don't know. That's your job. You guys are the stakeholders. You need to do something. And he goes, I can't get involved. Like, you're going to be the voice to me. You're going to get me hacking, telling me that when hopefully the conservatives are in power, using his words, that you're holding me accountable. And so you guys need to figure that out. So SCI has been very active on the file. And there was actually 4 groups and it really came down to 4 individuals that we talked about this a little bit out there. So there was Delta Waterfowl
Mm-hmm.
and the Fur Institute of Canada and SCI Canada and the Wild Sheep Society BC. And we were sort of talking at the event and then offline. And we kind of all said, somebody needs to take and run with this. And nobody was doing it. So we started discussing it about the evolution and what this could look like, and is it necessary, and who's going to lead it. The one cool thing about CWCP is that the 4 orgs that were discussing this were very like-minded. It was big picture, big tent. We need to do something. It wasn't about advancing necessarily the societies or SCIs or Fur Institutes or Delta's initiatives. It was about the greater good for hunters and trappers. I'm going down a rabbit hole here. I'm sorry, but we looked at lots of different models, and there are different models. The US has models for this. They've got a couple of scenarios that have worked pretty effectively. And so we looked at a bunch of that stuff and talked to some of the leaders down there, and we built a Canadian model. So, this started over a year ago, and we just launched here. It was on the National
Hunting
Hunting.
Trapping Heritage Day, right? Would have
Yeah,
been the
I knew you would.
last Saturday in September,
Yeah,
somewhere
September
in there.
20th or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So we're all of 5 weeks old, and it's been a tremendous journey, a lot of fun, and I think it's an important space, and the feedback has been incredibly positive. Of course, there's the haters out there, and there's
Always going to be.
there's some people that maybe are doubtful and really questioning the motives. But what I love is that we have the big tent, and we want to be a national voice.
Mm-hmm.
And when hunters or trappers are getting railroaded, that we can come to government and say, hey, no, enough's enough.
That's right. And you know me, you and I go back a bunch of years, and you and I have said it back and forth. Go figure that if you're getting the hate, it means you're doing something right. You're irritating people that don't want you to move ahead. And that's applicable to any scope of what you're doing in this world. And that's why I was so happy when I got the text from you saying we're going live with it. I was like, hell yeah, here we go. This is something I can jump behind. And unfortunately, you mentioned that SCI is a big push behind this. We don't have Chris Everett joining us tonight. She's had some major internet issues today, as well. It's going on with some stuff back east. So we've said, you know what, let's just roll with this tonight. We'll get Chris on another time. So you talked a little bit about the stakeholders that helped found this. You mentioned the Fur Institute, you mentioned SCI, you mentioned Wild Sheep, because you're here. And I can say that I've had Doug from the Fur Institute on, I've had Chris from SCI on, I've had you on more than once. So that kind of says something there, that these people that are jumping on board with this are not afraid to, one, get in front of the camera and say we believe in this, and two, to rattle some cages, rattle some chains, and get in front of government and go, you know what, enough's enough, because we've all had those conversations on these platforms here. So this is something I'm really excited to see where it goes in the future. So what gap in the conservation world are you hoping to fill with this organization? I know all of our organizations have their own little niches, but what one are you hoping to fill together as a united org?
First of all, I want to sort of preface it by saying that one thing that we're not trying to do is, be the gun lobby.
Right.
Obviously, as hunters and trappers, that's important to us, but we have that voice there. We have a national voice. We have
Hmm.
organizations that are doing a fantastic job. So yeah, like that, we'll leave them, and that doesn't mean that we might not show up in Ottawa with, when there is a major change. And interesting enough, the CCFR is a member, affiliate member of the
They sure
CWCP,
are.
which is interesting, right? So, very cool connection there. I think that the key takeaway with the CWCP is that when there's a national change, a regulation change that is an issue, or it might even be provincial. And that's the one thing that we've nuanced is that
Hmm.
if we look at our friends down south in the US, there's an AWC, American Wildlife Conservation Partners,
Right.
as well. And we're loosely based off that model. But the big difference is that a lot of wildlife issues within Canada are provincial issues and they're provincial stakeholder issues. So we are not afraid to go into a jurisdiction and say, hey, we've got a problem. We might write a letter to the Manitoba government. We might write a letter to the BC government. It's national in scope. One thing we learned, and Doug Chason from the Fur Institute of
Hmm.
Canada is very knowledgeable. He's worked in government before, and he understands how it works. And Doug kept saying that when somebody shows up and knocks on the door of a provincial government and says, hey, we got a problem, and they're from outside the province,
Hmm.
you pay attention
They
because
do.
you're getting the attention outside the province. And so he said it's a powerful voice, and we've seen it too. So there's going to be issues, but if we look on like a broad scale, for example, disease. So we've got the Movi issue in wild sheep. We've got CWD. We've got issues around the avian bird
Hmm. The flu.
disease and things like
Yep.
that. So there's these issues like that, for example, where we may need a national voice, and there's a sort of a plethora of other things that are of concern as well. And one of the things that has come up and that we're seeing a lot of is land use, right? So, access to the backcountry and so I think these are all issues that we will weigh in on, and certainly on a national level. But I think too there'll be jurisdictional levels in the provinces that will weigh in on territories as well. And there are probably issues that are, for example, we've written a letter to Manitoba over some of the things that are happening over there, again, on access to land and public lands. And it's a Manitoba issue, but we can see it's probably going to happen here in British Columbia, probably other
It sure
jurisdictions
is.
too. So, it's probably a national issue, but it's being handled at a provincial level, but it may extend to the national government as well. So a bit of a mixed message there, Steve, but the key takeaway is, what our vision is that the government does something that really challenges our hunting or trapping heritage, and we show up to Ottawa, and it doesn't matter what party it is, whether it's NDP, Liberal, Conservative, or other, and we come in and we say this is not acceptable, and they listen because there's 2 million, 3 million voters that are being represented, and they're like, okay, we can't afford not to listen to these guys.
Hmm.
We've seen that with AWCP in the US. It's been very successful. They have a really, really, really strong voice. And one of the things I learned talking to one of the representatives down there was that quite often representatives from the House will come to them and ask them for advice. They're like, hey, we've got this issue
Hmm.
and it's going to affect wildlife. How do we deal with that? So now they've become the trusted source. They want to go and work with these entities, and they know that this issue is going to go through no matter what, because whatever the case may be, that the party is pushing that platform, but they're coming to them. How can we work with you guys to make this happen? And man, wouldn't that be nice if Mark Carney or his minister reached out to the CWCP and said, hey,
Hmm.
can you help us with this? We've got a problem here, and what's going to be best for the hunting community, and how can we fix this?
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there. You touched on it real quick. You kind of skirted by it, but that's one thing in all my years of working and dealing with government and the nonprofits in the nonprofit sector and just being a concerned citizen is is the fact that governments, they listen to numbers. And the other thing you really, really want is government to look at you as a reliable source. They know you are a trusted source of information. They know you're a subject matter expert. I still get phone calls and text messages from various elected officials around the province that say, "Hey, what are your thoughts on X, Y, and Z?" And I have meaningful conversations, and occasionally you'll hear them stand up in the legislature and go, and they'll talk about something that they talked about with me, and I go, "All right, you can check the Hansard notes," and go, "Yeah, I actually said that." But kind of talk a little bit more about the numbers there. I got two words for you. It goes back about 5 years, and those two words are act now. We showed up on the steps of the legislature during COVID. There wasn't a ton of people there because the government was doing their thing with the shutdowns. But you, on behalf of the Wild Sheep Society and the people we rallied, submitted 50,000 letters to government because there was a concerted push to stop predator hunting in British Columbia. They were coming after lynx, they were coming after cougar, they were coming after bobcat, and we saw in the fine print from their presentation there that they again were going to extend it to sheep and caribou. And their rationale behind it was that nobody goes into the backcountry for 2 weeks and pulls out all that meat. They don't do it. So you showed up on there representing 50,000 people. And what happened? That was pushed right off the table because we showed up in not in physical numbers, but in numbers that they had to listen to. When you got a voter base that's saying, you know what, this is what we want, you come together as a concerted effort, government takes notice. And that's why I love that you touched on that. Is numbers are so important. You may not think that your letter or engaging with your elected official does anything, but when you combine it with my letter and Kyle's letter and Chris Everett's letter, et cetera, and the governments hear from you united, they have to take notice. And I've said that so many times on this show before. That's why I'm so excited to see what you guys and gals are doing with this CWCP. So, how many organizations do you have right now?
Well, very early days, Steve.
Mm-hmm. You
We've
started with four.
Yeah, we started with four, and it quickly grew. Immediately, people reached out, and we're going through the applications, and there is an application process.
Love that.
So we now represent certainly hundreds of thousands of Canadians,
And look how quick
without
that came
question.
together.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. We have about 20 organizations that have joined. And the cool thing for me, Steve, is it's the whole gamut. We've got trappers, we've got um, resident representation. So, Manitoba Wildlife Federation, for example, we've got the society, we've got SCI, we've got a number of outfitting organizations that are part of this. We've got the media connections. They're basically affiliate partners because they don't quote necessarily have membership per se. But the cool thing is we have organizations like Canada in the Rough, Blood Origins, Wild Origins, I guess is the new name. Organizations like that are affiliate members. What do? They allow it to carry that message forward. And just to shout out, Wild TV would be a great affiliate of the CWCP. So just saying.
Just saying, you might know somebody or two there, right?
Exactly. And again, that's really important. And they're affiliate members in the sense that they don't necessarily have a membership, but boy, do they have a viewership. And when we need to do a call to action, act now, what better way to reach that community? So yeah, hundreds of thousands of Canadians are represented by our members. And my vision, I want to see, if you care about hunting and trapping and its heritage and its perpetuation, get involved. That's what we want. We want these organizations to step up because I want to show up in Ottawa en masse with a voice so that they can't miss us. And I feel like, there just isn't that. It just doesn't exist. There are smaller coalitions. They're doing great work, but they're relatively just don't have the numbers. And there's no reason why we can't have 2-3 million Canadians have a voice. And when you show up with that kind of numbers, people have to pay attention.
And again, you nailed it, right? They pay attention to numbers, and it doesn't cost anything to join, right?
Absolutely. There's no charge at all. There is, right now there are some costs associated. There's the four steering, the steering committee that we created, the four of us. So as I mentioned, Delta Waterfowl, Canadian Fur Institute, the Society, and SCI Canada. And we've been bearing the costs, website, all that stuff. But really, right now, there's not a ton of costs. We have a charter. We have a website, but not a ton of expenses. Now, down the road, we envision meeting yearly, probably biannually, every 6 months. But we'll certainly be meeting in Ottawa, sort of around in the summertime. That's typically when we get out to Ottawa, and there's the conservative symposium that's out there. So we'd probably tie it into that. So there will be some expenses at some point, but right now, zero cost. So there's really not, and there's also no gateway to departure. You get part of it and you're like, this isn't working for us for whatever reason. I couldn't see why that wouldn't be the case. You can simply choose to leave, I guess, if somebody, so far we haven't had anyone do that. So.
But you're only 5 weeks old, right? I don't anticipate anybody wanting to leave. What's really cool again to me is you touched on that you've got a membership, for lack of a better term, of so many diverse groups and organizations, and not all of them hunt. All of these people and these organizations that they represent have said enough's enough. And what I want to know is, what are some of the biggest challenges that are facing Canadian conservation right now?
Yeah, well, as hunters and trappers, and that's really who we're looking after, is those interests. And there's a conservation side, and it's right in the name, Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partner. But if we don't have hunters, we don't have conservation. Let's be honest. We do the heavy lifting, whether it be through our tag fees. One of the things that we would like to see is a dedicated funding model, a national funding model, a Pittman-Robertson style. We haven't advocated for that or really done much on that. A lot of the stuff now is a little bit reactionary, dealing with issues that come up. But I think that's one of the things as partners we've discussed. The one thing that we had to do, Steve, is we had to stand this thing up. We had to get it on its feet. And the way we got it designed is that there's the four of us that's part of the steering committee. But the vision is once we hit 20 members or 2 years, whichever comes first, and clearly it's going to be 20 member orgs first, because we're basically on the verge of that right now. A couple of those are affiliates, so that's not included in that. We'll have elections for the steering committee. Our vision is it's grassroots. We're not the head shed saying, we're not the gatekeepers, right? That's our membership. That's their job. They decide the issues that are going to come forward. And if there's issues that we want to advance, our membership will do that. So right now, there are some issues that we've weighed in. We've sent 4 or 5 letters to the government already, but there's going to be, it will be our membership that makes those decisions. And our membership will be the ones that are bringing this to government, to the steering committee, to the partners, and then we will make a decision collectively as a group as opposed to individuals. So.
Yeah, it makes sense from somebody, again, who's been involved with stuff like this over the years, that eventually you're going to get to that growth where you need to elect, et cetera, and then you're run by oversight, but ultimately you're accountable to the members. So we're going to pause things here. We'll pick up this conversation right after this break. Welcome back, everybody, to Wild Talk. This segment, Tools of the Trade, it's a fun one. We've got George from Rozvelt with us. Rozvelt's a Canadian company that's breaking new ground in the world of scent control. George, a huge thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Steve, how's it going?
I'm looking outside. It's going to be October anytime soon. It's kind of overcast. It was foggy this morning. So I just mean it's prime hunting season. So speaking of hunting, Rozvelt has got a game changer of a thing coming up. So before we get really into that, talk a little bit about Rozvelt and the story behind the brand and what it is.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So Rozvelt is all about scent control. And if you're a hunter or a passionate wildlife observer, you know all about this, right? So you probably have all the gear, all the different products to manage your scent during hunting, and wildlife observation. And what we realized is, despite being able to control different kinds of scents, people currently have no solution to manage their breath. And so there are certain types of products out there, but none of them were really solving the problem to the level of satisfaction that we wanted to bring into the table. And that's essentially the essence of Rozvelt. It's 2 guys that really wanted to bring a solution to the market, proudly Canadian, as you say. We've been really building it very, very strongly for the past year in terms of research and development. A lot of R&D's gotten into it. We put a couple patents on it now, and we're proudly commercializing it as of a couple months ago.
That's pretty cool. So talk a little bit about how this story came together. What was that trigger that made you go, you know what? I think it's something like 80% of a hunter's scent you say comes from their breath. What made you go, we've got the idea to stop that and fix that?
Yeah, and it's an interesting story. It's actually my co-founder, who's a very, very big hunter. And so he was bear hunting, and they did a shot, and the shot ended up being a wound shot, and the bear got very, very far away. And they caught what we call blood dogs. And blood dogs, turns out, they don't only smell blood, they smell what we call adrenaline and different types of volatile organic compounds that are liberated from the animals due to stress and different types of hormones once the animal is running away. And so they were able to trace back that animal kilometers away 24 hours later following a big storm. And so for him, it was like this big click moment saying, whoa, wait a minute. If this dog is able to trace an animal on a certain types of volatile organic compound, how much am I leaving away from my own personal scent? And we realized, coming back to your point of 80%, is that 80% of the VOCs that we leave on our scent trail as hunters or observers come currently uncontrolled from our breath, because we manage everything else, but 80% is still uncontrolled from our breath, and that's why we need to always take into account the wind factor and stuff like that.
So your solution to that is called the Vector. Talk about that.
Currently, as you know, a lot of products try to manage scent control and breath control. There's a lot of products in the market that try to cover your breath, whether that's different toothpaste, different breathing products, and there's a couple of masks out there that will filter on the way in and on the way out, but they're very, very restrictive. What we've developed, and I'll show you as I'm talking to you about it, is really a premium product that's built to last. So it's a product you buy once, and then the point is you take care of it, and it's really built to last. It's made for both bow hunters and rifle hunters, and it comes with this magnetic headset. So essentially put it on, which allows you to do different types of adjustments based on the morphology of your head. And then it also comes with what we call the Vector. The Vector essentially only filters your exhale, but does not filter your inhale, which allows you to breathe in fresh air, smell the woods, and have no restriction. So it's really a game changer in that sense, where we're the only company and the first company in the world to only filter in one way, but not filter on inhale. And so as you see, magnetic headset, you put it and it stays on you. And then you can also, with one hand, it stays in place. If you want to just take it out to do your final bow shot, for example, during the final approach, you can take it back out and you can then put it back in. And that's about it. So that's the Rozvelt Vector. Comes with rechargeable filters. Following every hunt, you can just change your filters. So as I said, you just buy it once and then you just maintain it like you would with your rifle.
That's pretty cool looking setup. So if somebody says, does it really make a difference? What's your answer to that?
Well, it's like any other tool, right? There's a specific persona of customer that will always require a certain set of tools. Depending on the way you hunt or the way you observe, there are certain tools that will matter more to you. And so we really believe there are certain types of individuals that will absolutely require this in their toolkit. And we already have a lot of customers that are coming in and talking to us and saying, I absolutely think you will change the way I hunt. Now, whether that's during the way you control the wind now, when you're transitioning to your tree stand, when you're actually in the tree stand and you want to now be able to not be detected, when you're going to the final approach, depending on the type of hunt you do, the type of observation you do, the types of weather that you're going through, we believe we're bringing you a new tool to be able to better have the odds in your favor.
Cool. So someone wants to get their hands on one of these, where do they do it?
You just go to rozvelt.com and you can pre-order now. And you'll be able to get them for your next hunting in 2026.
Awesome. Thanks a ton for explaining a bit about it today, George.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Steve.
So you touched on again, you kind of like to give me a little tidbit and then force me back to it. And this is why we've been friends for so long. Well, wait a minute. You said this. I remember that. Pittman Robertson. Again, this is a conversation you and I have had, oh God, hundreds of times, officially, unofficially, and how we would love to see something like that instituted in Canada. And for those that don't know what the Pittman-Robertson Act is out of the States, run to Google, type that in, do a little bit of research on it. They call it an excise tax. And I know nobody likes the term tax. They say, and no, we don't want anything like that. But the way it works is that if you're involved in any sort of use of the backcountry, the outdoor users like bird watchers, somebody goes and buys a set of binoculars, there's a little Pittman-Robertson tax on it and a little excise tax, whatever is like 2% or whatever. But it all gets put into a federal fund and then redistributed to directly on the ground wildlife. So if you're buying a pack of bullets, if you're buying a rifle, I believe snow machines and ATVs are in there as well. Don't quote me on that, but I believe there still are. So anybody that's accessing the backcountry resources in any shape or form gets this tax put on them. But I believe it was founded, 1939, something like that. And they have literally put billions of dollars on the ground with this program. And that's why you see some of these wildlife success stories out of the States. I think it's Wyoming. They've got a bag limit of something like 15 whitetail a year per person. You want to talk about success stories on the ground? That's one of them. Again, look at the great work that Ducks has done, where they went from conservation issues to being able to dump so much money into the resource that this time of year, no matter where you are in North America, you can hear that quack as they're heading south, right? So Pittman-Robertson, that would be my first priority, but I'm quite biased. I've got no problem saying, look, I'll pay a little bit more for a set of binos as long as I know it's going back on the ground. And I know you're quite passionate about that one as well, so we could just throw that off the table. I know that's on your table. So talk about some of the success stories in the early stages. What kind of measures and metrics do you have for saying, hey, we're on the right track here?
Well, I think, it's so early, like you said, Steve, we're 5 weeks in. And I think what it is the engagement that we're getting. We're getting people that are stepping up. We've got, like I said, over 20 partner organizations with our affiliates so far, and a very diverse group. So, we look at it, it's not just resident hunters, it's not just outfitters, it's not just trappers. We've got a bunch of trapping associations in there. And we've got a ton more coming. We'll be announcing here in the next week or so. But there's a bunch that are in the wings. They've put their application in, and we vet them as we've discussed. We've put together some letters. We've already got a couple letters out there, and they're on our website. I won't go down in the weeds on those, but I think that's the cool part. One of the key principles of CWCP is that you have the right to sort of not sign on to a letter. So, for example, the CWCP, as it comes to the partners, they make a decision on it, and then and it's brought by the partners. They're like, hey, we've got this issue. They're the local experts. They know the issue better than anyone. It's not me to decide what's the most important issue for Manitoba or Newfoundland or anywhere else for that matter. So the partners bring it in. It gets vetted. There has to be some sort of process there. And then maybe the letter gets modified slightly, and then it gets presented to the larger group. They have a window to vote on it, on whether or not they want to support it. The one thing that we've said right from the start is there's zero jeopardy if you don't want to support it. If you say, hey, you know what, I agree with that in principle, but we've got this partner that it's going to infect them, or just for whatever reason, and there's no jeopardy. And we've had that already. And to me, that's a small measure of success, but we've already had letters brought. The majority have signed on, and there's been one or two partners that have said, we're going to have to pass on this one, and that's cool. So, again, early days. It's not like we've written letters or we've reached out to Ottawa and all of a sudden there's been this massive change, but we're seeing the process work the way we want it to, and just the engagement. We've got so many partners buying in and getting involved, and I'm really excited the direction it's headed, Steve.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing to me that you're an organization that's representing so many diverse user groups, but there's a key there that you don't have to sign on to something if you don't agree with it and you can't support it. You can be a part of the big picture, but you can kind of pick and choose. And again, that's a great way of uniting people, because Again, you and I both know that sometimes there's something philosophically you may not agree with, but you're part of something that says, I kind of need to lean into this, and basically you're either all in or all out. And
Mhm.
that's going to be a huge thing for bringing these user groups that are different interests, different priorities, but ultimately they still want to see more wildlife and more habitat on the landscape, and that's great. What kind of responses have you had for other conservation leaders across Canada? I know you talked about Manitoba, and I know Doug's out on the East Coast, but have you had buy-in from all the provinces yet, or how's that look?
Yeah, we got a really diverse group, to me, it's really exciting. Of course, there was the four of us on the steering committee that initially started off, and one of our first applicants was the Alberta Professional Outfitters Society, so they joined right away. We've got BC Trappers, we've got 3 or 4 here in British Columbia. Of course, Delta Waterfowl. I think they're our biggest partner. CCFR is our biggest affiliate, but
Right.
Delta Waterfowl is, they've got a big membership, which was really cool. And of course, they were on the steering committee. The Fur Institute of Canada really represents trappers across Canada, but then individual trapping organizations have jumped in. So we've got Nova Scotia trappers are on board. We've got obviously BC. We've got just really, really cool buy-in there. Manitoba Wildlife Federation was one of the first ones to jump on. They're the first federation to jump on, but there's others now too coming on board. So we got Newfoundland and Labrador represented. I don't know that we have, and actually we have our first Quebec affiliate as well. I think Born to Hunt, It's a Lifestyle, is out of Quebec. So really, really good, diverse.
Miguel Belial.
Yeah. Yes. So, to me, that's a hallmark of a national organization when you have representation all across. I
Huge.
think there's probably a couple territories that we still need to do a bit more work and outreach on, but we started that dialogue, and people are buying in. It's interesting. Veteran hunters,
Mm-hmm.
they've come on board, and that's a voice we need.
It's a
Veteran
great
hunters need a
organization.
voice, and there's something that. And the very first thing that Todd said to me is that, hey, if you need someone to stand up a committee to support you for veteran hunters and their issues within Canada,
Mm-hmm.
let me know. I'm all on board. So great representation, great diversity, and really excited about the direction we're headed.
There's got to be somebody up in the Yukon affiliated with a sheep society that's pull some strings, right?
Well, we've been bugging our sheep people, and I'm not going to speak on where they're at right now, but I can say it's looking good. I'll say that. So
That, to me, that would be a huge measure of success if you could essentially look at a map and go, we've got a representative in every organization, or an organization in every territory, every province across Canada. That's a united voice that government is going to have to listen to, as we talked about a few minutes ago, right? So obviously you're communicating around the country, and people are reaching out to you, and organizations are reaching out to you. So communication is obviously a big part of what you do with that. Like, how important is communication and transparency in trying to build these partnerships?
yeah, Steve, I think that's critical. And we, it was Doug, when we were building this thing. Doug said that he was part of a coalition years ago. It was in the hunting community, and there was 2 entities that sort of were part of it. They were built it together, and the very first issue came out, and they were diametrically opposed to it. It never got past the first issue, right?
Right.
And I think like that, we built it for success. And the one thing that that we've talked about as a steering committee members is that this is a grassroots org, and we're listening. And that's our goal, is that we're listening. Our members are driving it, not top down. So we're listening, and they're taking the direction. And we also have some guidelines. We have a charter, and if things are just not, for example, maybe there's something that is a very nuanced outfitting issue, or maybe it's a sheep issue, and it's like, well, maybe you sheep guys should just get together and put a letter in on that. And that doesn't mean that, if it's something that affects everybody, and it's certainly not, but there are global issues, or Canada-wide
Mm-hmm.
issues that we all can agree on that might not be, but there might be times where we say, yeah, maybe you need to take this offline and deal with that. And like, it just might be more effective, especially if the only two people are the sheep people signing on to the letter. That's probably your first clue. So, we do have some input that way, and some sort of, we're not just going to sign on to everything. And that was the other thing that came up too, is like, how many letters are you going to send off to the government? Because if you show up with 95 letters, it's,
you're diluting it.
now you're just the squeaky wheel, right?
Yeah, you're diluting it.
Exactly. So, we look at our friends down at the American Wildlife Conservation Partners, AWCP. I think they had like 27 or 28 letters when we checked them a few weeks ago. So very high level issues. And then what happens is something comes up, and this is the AWCP. We're not there yet. But the AWCP, something comes up. They're all out on Capitol Hill, and their voice is being heard. And there's a bit of a sort of they're working together. They've got a plan, and they're speaking from the same page. They're not necessarily representing the AWCP all the time. It might be their individual organizations, but that's the other thing too, is that when we come together as these orgs, we can say, okay, there's this public land issue, or there's this big issue nationally that's really, really going to be a train wreck. We need to get all on the same page, and then we're all united in our efforts. And we've seen that successfully. And I keep talking about public lands because we've seen that down south. Remember that Senator Lee issue that came up? And this is American politics. It's not really our wheelhouse, but I watched it because for a variety of reasons. And the AWCP was critical in that. They were absolutely critical. And if you talk, even the influencers, they were critical too, like the Cam Haines and the Randy Newbergs of the world. They were showing up, and I think some of the country music stars were even making noise about it. And, collectively, but the AWCP was at the heart of that, and their members and their member orgs, the TRCPs and the WSFs and the DSCs and the Delta Waterfalls of the world were down in Washington, and they were a voice, and they were all speaking the same thing. And that's the stuff that we need to do as an org, as a CWCP, when we have these things that are really going to impact our hunter and our trapping heritage.
Oh, they do that so well down there.
Yep,
we've relied on some of their modeling over the years. When I remember there's a picture about 5 years ago. They talked about they were just going to close one section of private land somewhere in one of the states, and they had something like 10,000 people show up to the public hearing at a courthouse. Like, it was a small town, and they flooded it with counties upon counties upon counties of people that just said, no, we care. And obviously those politicians went, whoa, we're pulling that off the table quick. So I'm hopeful when you show up at government with, we saw 50,000 letters. Imagine what we could do with 1 million across the province or across the country, right? We have a localized issue here in British Columbia, and we get 1 million people across representing the organization signing on for these letters. The politicians here are going to listen. It's the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And it's the one showing up that they listen to. We've had conversations over the years with many politicians between you and I and the people we represent, and every single one of them says the same thing. If even 10% of the hunters and anglers showed up at my office every year, we would have to listen to you. There's nothing we could say no to, right? For now, hunters have kind of flown under the radar for the most part, right? A lot of them just are quite content to go, I don't want to rattle any cages. I'll just go hunt my deer, go hunt my moose. And then all of a sudden we see these issues like the CCFR is battling, where grandpa's old 30-06 is now on the banned list, right? Because people were content to fly under the radar. And that's why I'm so stoked to see this organization come to light and see what it does in the future. Because as you know, I'm a big fan of you, big fan of Chris, big fan of Doug. They're very, very astute, smart individuals. Yes, that's being recorded too. I said that about you.
I'm going to hold that over your head, buddy. You said.
Exactly. Episode 20, season 4, right? He said it, and it's true, because you care and you will get in the face of government. And Chris worked for government for years, so she's a natural fit for this. And I don't think we could have any better representation to kind of head the steering committee for now. I want to see who's going to keep pouring into this melting pot of of people that just truly give their time, give their effort, and just will take 20 minutes a week to write their politician and engage and go, hey, still here. You haven't forgot about me, and I'm not going to let you. So, any surprises so far that have come out when you put this organization together? You went, wow, didn't expect that.
You know, I wouldn't say I would say it's gone as smooth as it can go. And you know, there were going to be little hiccups,
Of
and we've
course.
been very proactive, and we've listened. Like you said about communication, Steve, we've listened. It's a grassroots org. We're not there to be the judge and jury. We're there to guide this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's been little things. You know, we've made a couple little changes to things, but honestly, it's nothing significant. We spent a lot of time standing this thing up. We had a lot of support from the CWCP. We actually attended their annual meeting in Calgary a couple of months ago this summer, and that was enlightening to see the process. They were really generous with their time and experience, and gave us a lot of great ideas. We built a Canadian one. There's no doubt about it. We didn't rubber stamp something that they're doing down south because it wouldn't work.
No.
We had to make it Canadian, and so you know. Maybe seems like a cheat, me cheating by saying not really, but honestly, there's not too much. Like, you know, we've made changes, we've listened, but it's pretty minor. It's a big picture. It's pretty consistent, and I'm loving the direction it's going.
You listened, right?
Mm.
That's, again, so important, especially when you're starting off. Like, I've joined clubs and organizations where you're trying to get something off the ground and you feel like you're spinning your wheels. You're not getting that buy-in. You're not getting your support, and then people tend to pull away, and you're kind of left on your own, right? And I don't see that happening with this organization because, as I said, you got some great voices leading you from the get-go, and it's tough to see people that are that's stubborn, for lack of a better term, but they're working well together, right? And I say that out of love for you all. It's a great thing to see people that have got no problem getting in someone's face and going, that ain't right. But to get them to come together and work for one voice, the sky's the limit for this. So as we start to wrap this up, we're already rolling past that time limit that I said. It was like, wow. So here we are. What I want to know, and I think a lot of our people want to know, is how can an organization that wants to get involved become involved? Same question for affiliates.
Yeah, for sure. So you know, that was kind of my thoughts as we're talking through this. Is I have a bit of a call to action. You know, we talked a little bit about this. First of all, just if you're just a regular individual, just get involved. If you care about your future, if you care about hunting, you care about trapping, your heritage, it's something that's important to you. Just get involved. Like, I'm just talking big picture. And you and I have talked about that, but show up to meetings, have a voice. When something comes across your desk and you don't like it, maybe it's a ban, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that, have a voice, because like we said, you can make a difference. When it comes to the org, Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners, we do have a website. It's canadianwildlifepartners.ca. So it's got a list there. And if you're part of an organization, whatever that might be, whether it's a fish and game club or others, and you're not part of that, ask them why. Because the head shed's the one making the decisions. Maybe they don't know about it. Fair enough. There's probably some that do, and maybe they've decided not to be part of it. So there's an opportunity. It costs nothing. So it's not a cost issue. It's a voice issue. So if you think that you need to be part of it, ask the leadership of, and there's millions of Canadians that are part of fish and game clubs. They're part of other organizations too, national organizations, provincial organizations, local organizations. This is a big tent. We want people to show up en masse. We want the government to respect us when we have an issue, and we're the trusted voice, so that they don't pull the stuff that has been going on now for far too long in our conservation community, in our hunting community, our trapping community. We need to unite, and the best way to do that is talk to your leadership and get involved.
Yep. Get involved. No matter what level you're at, whether or not you are person just sitting on the sidelines going, you know what, I don't like what they're doing here with this. Go talk to your elected official, go talk to your member of parliament, member of legislative assembly, whatever they call them, whatever province, territory you're in. Get involved. I literally still hear, I heard from one of them today. He's probably watching this, and you'll know who I'm talking about, Kyle. Texted me earlier today just to touch base. He's been touching base ever since he retired. Because I got in his face, we developed a great relationship. We're still friends 10 years later. They will remember you. They will listen to you, and you will have one hell of an advocate in government, provided you do your part. You do it respectfully, you do it with information, and you do it with a genuine care. Continue to do that. As Kyle said, get your organizations to partner up, to at least check out the CWCP, and we're going to have one heck of a united voice as hunters and anglers and sport shooters and trappers across Canada. So Kyle, stoked to see where this goes, my friend. Thanks for joining me again.
Thanks, brother. And thanks to Wild Talk, Wild TV for just doing the good stuff for hunters. We appreciate it.
Cheers. This episode of Wild Talk is brought to you by Hornady. Accurate, deadly, dependable. Bronc Beer. Great fucking beer. Umarex Air Guns. Hunt with air. Wild TV Plus, where the hunts never end.